Welcome to the U.S. Election Assistance Commission's Webisode on how to make sure vote-by-mail ballots count. My name is Christy McCormick, and I am the chair of the EAC, and I am moderating today's discussion on the various challenges and solutions for handling election mail. This is part of our series of BeReady16 in preparation of the 2016 elections. I'd like to introduce our panel for today's webisode. Starting on my right here, we have Daniel Bentley, Marketing Specialist for the United States Postal Service. And next to Daniel is Tammy Patrick, Senior Advisor for the Democracy Project at the Bipartisan Policy Center, also known as BPC. To my right is Anthony Albans from the Delaware Department of Elections and also on behalf of Elections Center.
Thank you.
To my left is Matt Bomer, Director of the Federal Voting Assistance Program, also affectionately known as FVAP.
Thank you.
And to his left is Monica Crane-Childers, Director of Government Services for Democracy Works. And on the very end, on my left, is David Ernst, Deputy Director of the Military Postal Service Agency. So welcome all. Thank you for participating. Before I start with questions, I'll ask each of you to make some brief opening remarks, and I'll start with Director Bomer.
Thanks. Thank you, Commissioner McCormick, and thank you to the EAC for hosting this event, particularly this webisode on election mail. This is a great opportunity to bring election experts together to inform our local election officials and our state election officials on the hot issues facing mail, particularly in its role in the 2016 election cycle. Because of the important role that mail plays with our military and overseas citizen voters, DoD, consisting of both FVAP and the Military Postal Service Agency, are thrilled to be part of this conversation. While we have made great progress in improving the postal voting process throughout the years, particularly for our military and our overseas voters, we know that not even a 99% success rate is good enough for elections. Our military and overseas citizens rely on the military and the United States Postal Services to carry their ballots to their local election offices, often from remote places from around the world. It's because of that the mail process and all the information surrounding these interactions need to be shared with our voters, our military voting assistance officers, and our election officials. Many of you have heard me talk about the importance of collaboration at the federal and state levels, and it is through our partnerships and sharing this information and working towards solutions for our voters that we can really affect change. A thank you in advance to our expert panel here today for your role in helping ensure that all voters, but particularly that our military and overseas voters and their families, can successfully exercise their most fundamental right, which is their right to vote. From our 2014 survey results at the Department of Defense, we know that 67% of our active duty military are not confident that their ballot is counted. Therefore, we need to ensure that the postal process is working for them, and us working together to solve some of these issues and to share information will go a long way towards making that count. So thank you for having me here today.
Thank you. Mr. Albans?
Thank you very much, Commissioner, and thanks as well to the EAC and to the panel. I'm also pleased to be here and representing a local jurisdiction in the state of Delaware. We're very fortunate in our state. We are a small jurisdiction, so we can work together, we can innovate, we can do a lot on our level. And we're very fortunate to have, I think, a lot of great partners at the table. In one of my roles with the state, I've been able to interact a lot with the USPS, with the Postal Service. And I think one of the messages I want to communicate as we get into this webinar today is that Postal Service is here to help local election officials. I think some of our colleagues sometimes are intimidated, and I don't think they need to be. The Postal Service, FVAP, the EAC, we have a ton of great agencies, a ton of resources to help our local election officials deliver the product to the voters, both our military and overseas voters and our civilian voters. Everyone. There are a ton of tools out there. There are a ton of resources. We just need to work together. There's nothing to be afraid of. Everyone is here to help, and hopefully we'll have a great conversation about that today. Thank you for having me.
Mr. Bentley.
Thank you, Commissioner. Again, I'm happy to be here with such a distinguished panel today. The U.S. Postal Service is steadfast in its commitment to the democratic process and the election community. We are aware of the extent to which voters, candidates, political parties, and election officials rely upon us for timely delivery of ballots. and other election-related mail, and we are committed to fulfilling our responsibilities in enfranchising voters to participate in the electoral process. The Postal Service has benefited from its strong, consistently positive relationship with the election community. This is a relationship that we have enjoyed for many years and that we intend to remain positive well into the future. We appreciate all of the accomplishments we have achieved in partnership with the election community, and I thank you for your commitment to working with us. We are proud of the work we do to support state and local election officials. Our strong partnership with the Federal Voters Assistance Program and the Military Postal Service Agency helps ensure the needs of the military and overseas voters are met. As state and local election officials, political candidates, campaign committees, and other voter mobilization organizations promote and encourage voting in America, we are ready to support the growth in vote-by-mail initiatives. Again, the Postal Service is committed to working with election officials to ensure the reliable distribution of election mail pieces from the design phase through entry, processing, and delivery. And I'd like to echo Anthony's comments as well. One of the themes of the conversation today is a commitment to communications and exposing resources, which we all avail ourselves to every day.
Thank you. Ms. Crane-Childers.
Well, thank you again. I'm so pleased to be here and talking with all of you today. We know that election mail is going to be critical, as it is in every election, but particularly in a presidential election. The increased volume of ballots that you get in a presidential, we know there's going to be an increased volume of mail just from that. We also know that the two major political parties are pushing early voting and vote by mail as a way for them to minimize the work they have to do on an election day just from a strategy standpoint. And more local election officials and state officials across the country are looking at vote by mail as a way to spread out the work that they have to do just from the 24 hours of election day and maybe bring that out to a further, give more voting options, but also allow them to have a little more time to do their work. So we know that this is going to be a crucial issue in 2016. And I'm so pleased to be talking about it because only if we keep communicating about the issues that we're seeing and keep the lines open from the post office to the EAC and beyond, that's how we're really going to see real change being made in election mail and ensure that everybody's getting the ballots they need to get. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ernst.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
You're welcome.
The Military Postal Service Agency oversees the Military Postal Service, which operates as an extension of the United States Postal Service overseas. For each general and midterm election, the MPSA publishes a strategic postal voting action plan. On December 15th of 2015, we published that plan for the 2016 election. Our plan contains the recommended mailing dates for absentee ballots from all post offices around the world, for all military post offices around the world. During the past 3 elections, the MPS, the Military Postal Service, has postmarked and dispatched 128,000 absentee ballots with an average transit time of 5.3 days, with 96% of the ballots being delivered within 7 days in accordance with the MOVE Act. 33% of the absentee ballots that we received at the MPOs were undeliverable as addressed. The the Military Postal Service was able to redirect 78% of those undeliverable as addressed ballots, so the remaining 22% had to be returned back to the local election officials. Since the 2014 election, once DoD personnel submit a change of address to USPS, their addresses will be automation compliant and in the USPS National Change of Address. There are 2 areas that we need the local election officials' assistance. Where possible, use letter mail instead of flat mail to take advantage of the USPS's Postal Automated Redirection System, PARS, until PARS is able to is available on flat sorting equipment. And then for flat mail, use the most up-to-date current mailing address list that you can get. Thank you.
Thanks. Ms. Patrick.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. It's a pleasure to be here today and to talk about some of the intersection between postal services and elections. almost exactly 2 years ago, the Presidential Commission on Election Administration issued a report that really had some very key elements in it that I think are going to be some of the things that we'll hear echoed throughout the conversation today. And that was, we recommended expansion of voting opportunities, so inclusion of things like voting by mail, receiving your ballot by mail, but ballot tracking, data collection, and I think most importantly and most critically is communication with the postal services in a variety of ways, both with the local postmaster, with design analysts, with regional election mail specialists, and making sure that you're communicating in this collaborative relationship of when your mailing dates are going to be, what your volume is going to be, changes that you've had. So if you're redesigning your election mail envelope, making sure that it still comports with current standards. Because the reason this communication is so critical is we have a new reality. The postal standards changed last year for delivery. First class mail is now 2 to 5 days. Standard mail is 2 to 9 days. And many election officials maybe heard about it when that happened, but weren't in the middle of conducting an election and didn't think about how that's going to be conveyed to their voters. So we want to make sure that election officials are thinking about the instructions they're providing their voters, how they're replying to voters when they're requesting a ballot, to make sure that they understand the best ways to get their ballots back and ensure that they're actually going to be tabulated and counted as cast. So I'm very pleased to be included today in this conversation, and thank you for the invitation.
Well, thank you, and I think communications is paramount. If we can keep the lines of communication open between all of our state and local partners, federal partners, that we can overcome just about any issue that comes up. But we need to find out what those problems are and find the solutions for them. So the way to do that is, of course, to communicate. The EAC is very happy to be a bridge between all of our partners, our state, local, federal partners, and that we're working on a series of events like this for local election officials and state election officials to be prepared for 2016, and we're calling it BeReady16. It is, important for all of us to be prepared for this year's elections and what could possibly be a hiccup, and we hope that it's not, at least with the election mail issues. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and start asking questions. As I said, I'll start with a couple people, and feel free to jump in. I'm going to start on this side of the table with Dan, and then maybe Tammy and Anthony. And then my first question is, what should local election officials be thinking about as they design and prepare their ballots and election mail?
I think that's the focal point of the entire conversation today, what they should be thinking about and how we can coordinate communications between the various local and state agencies, as well as the EAC, FVAP, MPSA, and the USPS, of course. So one of the fundamental things that we're emphasizing this year is communication should start now. They should start early, before we get deep into the election cycle. We're recommending we have election mail coordinators at the district level. These people will help with the coordination of mail piece design activities. They will do prep and entry activities. They will help coordinate all activities through election day and beyond, if necessary, for those states that have the opportunity of mailing in ballots by postmark date. So communications early. We recommend, again, to emphasize the coordination with the district election folks that we have designated. We have that list available on our website on USPS.com. Mail piece design analysts, we strongly recommend, even if you've had the same ballot format for years, we strongly encourage that everyone take the format that they have now and just verify that. We want to make sure that if they're leveraging the best practice of using intelligent mail barcode, they're checking all of the specifications for mail piece design with a mail piece design analyst. Those folks are accessible through mda at USPS.gov. And again, I think anyone, I'll encourage anyone to pile in here, but essentially, it's about communications for us this year. We have the resources. We're deep with resources, not only within the Postal Service, but with partner relationships with the agencies at this table. So, please use us and use us early.
I would just, to build on that, I think Dan's absolutely right. First and foremost, the election officials need to understand what the parameters are and what the new reality, as I've been referring to it, is, so that they can turn around and communicate that to the voters. So making sure that postcard applications that they're sending out, that their website where a voter can go on to request a ballot, that it clearly defines and sets the proper expectation of the service that the voter is about to receive. And then in their materials themselves, before they're creating it, looking to see how they're using the official material logo. If they're going to be relying on, potentially on postmarks of the ballots being returned to them, to have an understanding of what size envelope will be able to go through the automated machine and be automatically postmarked. Both size of the envelope, the flexibility, how many card stocks are in there is very critical as well. And then also to consider having some sort of additional visual indicator on that envelope, whether it's a colored envelope or a color stripe that goes across the top, so that as a sweep is being done of the plant on election night, because hopefully the election officials going to the post office to pick up that election mail and the ballots at the end of their deadline, it's easy to spot these ballots as they're going through the volume of mail being returned.
I would also say, echoing some of what our colleagues here have said, I want to make sure I stress this for other local election officials. I think sometimes, and I mentioned this a little bit in my opening comments, I think sometimes local folks can be intimidated a little bit by the Postal Service. And I want to discourage people from thinking that completely. I've had the opportunity to work a lot, directly with Dan and with his colleagues, and Tammy, I know, echoes this from her time, I'm sure, at the state level and county level as well. The Postal Service is deep with resources, like you said, Dan, to help. And we literally just went through this past week in Delaware, redesigning some of our materials. And I can't speak highly enough of the online design tools, the Mailpiece Design Analyst. It really works like clockwork. I mean, they have really done a wonderful job, the USPS, of making it as pain-free, as customer-friendly as you can be. Literally, things worked like clockwork. I walked someone through it at our level, at the state level, who was new to the process. I had done it previously. Person picked it up in no time, submitted the items through the website, got a response within the 1 to 2 business days. Perfect. I mean, it really is that. And as Tammy mentioned, and this is very important, and I don't think all the local election officials grasp this, the postmark issue is so important. For example, in Delaware, we are not a postmark state. We accept the ballots until the time the polls close. But for many of the states where postmarks are an issue, it's essential that you do those maintenance type of things, like look at your design. If you have an indicia on your envelope that's going to impede your postmark, I mean, it sounds so simple, it sounds so elementary, but that can make or break an election. That's the last thing a local election official needs when balancing everything else, is to have something that could have been avoided, that could have been alleviated just with a little advance work. I can't stress that enough, and the Postal Service has been wonderful. And one more thing I'll say, that again, and Tammy mentioned it and Dan mentioned it too, build those relationships with your local election official, your local postal officials. Talk to your local plant supervisors, talk to your local postmasters, call them, visit them, so that you don't just show up on election day and expect to have access or expect to get ballots. You're not going to, you're going to be under the gun, you're going to be under stress. You need to build those relationships early and avoid those pinch points. So much of this is stress that can be alleviated or eliminated with just some advanced planning. It's not rocket science, as the phrase goes. They're here to help. Keep those relationships open, keep the lines of communication clear.
I'd like to add 2 points, if I could.
Sure.
Thank you, Anthony. I think a lot of points have been made here. With the Mailpiece Design Analyst, I mean, honestly, they're one of your best resources. They should be engaged very early with the election coordinators. They're there the Mailpiece Design Analyst, they're there to help ensure compliance with our rigorous specifications, as everyone's aware, as well as, optimizing it. Tammy touched on, a few best practices. We're talking about the use of the official election mail logo to increase visibility. On mailings in general, we strongly recommend using tag 191 for the domestic and international ballots. That is critical for visibility as soon as it's entered into the mail stream. again, mailpiece design analysts, they can coordinate with you and they can, let you know if you're looking for a specific delivery day. We don't guarantee that. However, we can guide you, based on the form factor that we discussed. Obviously, we do a much better job with letter automation products. Letters are, the form factor can be pretty large. It can be 6 1/8 by 11 1/2 by 1/4 of an inch thick. There are certain flexibility standards that Tammy touched on that we have to be sensitive to, because if it doesn't meet certain specifications, it's going to be treated as a flat. It goes through a little bit of a less automated process. We are improving our postmarking capability throughout our line today. We are improving what we're doing with letters, and we're also improving what we do with flats. So thank you for that.
Others, everyone jump in at all on this?
I think the thing that I would add too is when you're thinking about mail piece design, think about those envelopes. A lot of our local election officials are already ordering their envelopes for the general and the primary elections now, because they're ordering huge volumes of them and they're getting discounts by doing that. But be aware that the type of envelope you have, whether they're pre-printed with an intelligent mail barcode that's sort of a dummy barcode or not, those kinds of things can really affect what choices you have when it comes closer to the primary and the general. So be sure that as you're doing these things, don't just order the same envelopes that you've ordered for the past couple of years. Really think about it. Do go through the process and make sure you're checking what you're ordering, even right now as you're starting to put those orders in.
We've already covered touched on a lot of topics here, and I think we'll come back to some of these topics as we go through the questions, and they, we'll get a little bit deeper or repetitive, but I think that's good, so that the listeners and viewers can sort of digest all of what you're saying, because there's a lot here. So we'll, as we do the questions, we'll unpack a lot of these things that we've touched on already. So Daniel, you've mentioned it in your answer to your last question, but just to repeat it, who should election officials contact to redesign their election mail pieces? And is there a cutoff for designing those pieces?
The cutoff is largely based on the election official's schedule. We understand that, as candidates finalize their campaigns and people go through the primaries and the caucuses, and we vet the pool of potential candidates. Obviously, the ballots are shaped entirely after that process. So recognizing that, Anthony touched on it very well. I think that it's about a 24 to 48 hour turnaround. We're usually very prompt at returning mail piece design pieces. We know that it's important to the community. We turn those around as quickly as possible. We have support staff that's highly trained to do this. In fact, I would encourage people, again, to look at what they already have, from previous form factors, and, make that relationship with the mail piece design analyst. Again, make it with a coordinator. They're the best resources initially to get you started and guide you through the process. With regards to mail piece design analysts, they can also, in certain circumstances, they can help you design the envelopes themselves. They can put the intelligent mail barcode on it, the facial identification marks. They can make sure that you have an IMB. If you don't know what that is, they'll explain it to you. They'll walk you through the process. They'll put you in touch with other postal resources, which will, basically help you set it up. So again, we're very deep with resources, and we want to expose those, for everyone that may be unfamiliar at this point. Much like the Postal Service, we transition employees and we promote from within, and people change jobs, and we know that that's true in the election community as well. From a training perspective, I am working on a training presentation to help the election community, and I should have that done in the next couple of weeks. So be on the lookout for that. I think it would be good to start having mass trainings of people that would like to have a refresher course in postal procedures.
And what's the contact again for the...
Oh, thank you. For the mail piece design analyst, it's mda@usps.gov.
David, you brought up the postal automated redirection, PARS. Can you tell us what that is? And Daniel, feel free to jump in on this as well. And how can it be helpful for local election officials when designing their mail pieces?
Well, PARS is simply the ability to intercept a mail piece here in the U.S. at one of the USPS processing plants prior to that mail piece going overseas. Prior to PARS, the mail piece would go overseas, go to the military post office only to be turned around and sent back to either back to the local election official or onward to the mailer. This intercepts it en route from the local election official, intercepts it and sends it to wherever that new location is for the addressee.
Oh, and how is that helpful for the local election officials in designing their mail pieces?
Well, right now, PAR is only available for letter mail. Flat mail it's not available for yet, and so that's the issue here at heart. Is we know that there are states that have, or local election officials that have flat mail, so they don't get that advantage. So anytime a mail piece goes out that's undeliverable, that's a flat, it will go through that process. It'll go all the way out to the military post office, only to turn around and be sent back.
And
Daniel?
to segue off what
Yeah.
David was saying, we are looking at that as a development opportunity, and I think we've recently covered that. It's something to look forward to.
Others want to jump in on all?
If I could just add to that briefly, is that I think that an additional benefit is for the national change of address, the NCOA list maintenance that individuals are doing prior to mailing out the piece. That also, regardless of the class of service of the mail piece that's going out, when they run those addresses through, they will still benefit from getting updated information so that once the ballot is actually mailed out, it'll have a greater success rate, is my understanding of it. And I think that that'll have a huge benefit moving forward.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's the information that when we go out to election conferences that we're letting election officials know as well, that the big benefit of PARs or mill PARs is the NCOA.
Okay. I'll start with Anthony here. More than 6.5 million Americans utilized vote by mail in the 2012 general election. What specific strategies and techniques should election officials be employing in order to effectively prepare the USPS for an even greater number of vote by mail ballots in 2016? And feel free, of course, again, for any of you to jump into this question.
Absolutely. And I know Dan mentioned this as well, and it is key, and I think it bears repeating on that point, is communication with your local election official, your local postal officials, making sure that they know, especially if you're a vote-by-mail jurisdiction or if you're moving that way and you're going to have a large volume of mail going into the system, of absentee ballots or affidavits if you're a state that requires the request for ballots. Communicate with your local officials. We're going to have 20,000 ballots going into the mail today, so that they're not caught off guard, especially if you're under tight timelines. And again, I think most of what we've heard about in terms of problems on the local level go back to the lack of communication from the beginning in the design process. We're talking about the flats versus the first class. If there's any way, and again, I think local officials can do this as long as they keep those communication lines open. Do what you can to design your pieces to be first class. And as Dan said, there's a ton of flexibility in that. There's a lot of parameters. I think a lot of folks, even election officials, when they're designing their absentee ballots, they think it literally would need to be like a number 10 envelope. It can't be any bigger than that, or it can't be first class. I mean, just a Delaware example, ours are about 6 by 5, our absentee ballots, and they're first class. And we've worked with the elections officials, we've worked with the MDAs to make it happen. But again, communication, I think, is the key. Tammy mentioned it as well, and I think this is going to be very important this cycle, is the communication with your voters as well, because of these changing standards. I think we've been fortunate in our area that we haven't had as much of a need of adjustment because of the plant closings have not been as much of an impact in our area necessarily, but a lot of jurisdictions, I know they have been. So folks need to know whatever standards and whatever timelines that they may have been using even as recently as 2014 may not be the case in 2016 now. They can't rely on it, right? I would say a number of those changes have gone into effect since the 2014 election cycle.
Correct. The delivery standards changed in January of 2015. So I think it's a general awareness. We have to, Tammy's already provided those. First class mail is now 2 to 5 days. Standard mail is now 2 to 9 days. Of course, there are many variables to consider as it relates to size of ballots and form factors, but as a best practice, if an election official or the jurisdiction or the board can design toward automation return pieces, those being letter size up to 6 1/8 by 11 1/2 by 1/4 of an inch thick. Again, please work with a mail piece design analyst. They're there to help. Those automation pieces, again, up to 1 to 2 ounces, we have the highest degree of postmarking on that form factor of piece. Anthony touched on something else, which is first-class mail. We also recommend, we understand that you can use standard mail, but we absolutely recommend the use of first-class mail on the outbound. Of course, all of the return ballots we know are, they are first-class mail coming back, but we strongly recommend the use of first-class mail on all outbound pieces.
It's good to know.
Absolutely.
And I think class of service is a very critical element. So when we're talking about the time it takes for the ballot to get to the voter and to be returned, that's one thing. But we know that there are many jurisdictions that, for lack of resources or for a variety of reasons, will mail their ballots out at standard rate. So those that are going out at standard rate, it's critical to know that standard mail is subject to inspection. And so a couple of years back, we worked out a protocol that was put in place by the post office. They worked very collaboratively with election officials. So any ballots being mailed out at a standard rate, rather than leaving a voter's official ballot as being subject to inspection, you can include an example of the mailing of what would be found in that mail packet. So that's what's looked at, and it doesn't jeopardize a single voter's ballot from going out. So that's really important. And then last year, or it might have been in 2012, additionally, there was concern about voters not knowing how much postage to put on the return mail. So it's also a requirement that in that ballot packet, you tell the voter how much it's going to cost them to return it, unless you do business reply mail or you have an overage account. So if you have the ability for recovery of lack of funds when that occurs, you don't have to include that as an insert and information. Some of the other things that we strongly recommend is that election administrators have their ballots coming back to a P.O. box rather than waiting for the additional time for a mail carrier to bring that ballot to them in their office. And that way on election night at the close of the polls or whenever the deadline is, you have a central place to go and to get the ballots, and then to collaborate with your local offices for doing a quick walk through the plant to get any of those lingering ballots that are out there. Those are all really well-established practices that are done in many jurisdictions around the country.
But bear repeating for those who don't know these well-established practices.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I'd like to add on to one thing that Tammy said. One of the other noted exceptions, and we work very closely with FVAP and MPSA on this, is that for active military overseas, that is the other exemption other than business reply mail and postage due accounts.
Absolutely. And you can see the second and third order effects here of communication and education. The more information that we're able to get out to our election officials, the better off they are going to be able to inform our voters. And that's really ultimately what this comes down to. I mean, that ballot gets into the hands of our voters. They need to know what to do with it. They need to know the recommended mailing dates that we have from MPSA that are up on the FVAP.gov website. But this all comes down to informing our voters so that they're making good choices about when and how to return their ballots.
Right.
So Monica, I'll throw this one to you first. Postmarking issues have recently come to the forefront as a major challenge. Election officials and the USPS are working together to work on this issue and to address it. Can you share some information you might have about the specific problems that are occurring and offer solutions that you think could address these issues or are being considered for implementation?
Absolutely. So in many jurisdictions across the country, you have to have your ballot in by the end of close of polls on election day. In other jurisdictions, they're allowed to count them as long as they were postmarked by a certain date, either on election day or something like that. And what we're seeing is that in certain jurisdictions, not every ballot that's coming back has a postmark. Sometimes it gets missed. Sometimes it doesn't go through automation, doesn't get one. Sometimes it's just not readable. It gets smudged. The ink is literally not readable. We've seen this in Ohio last year. We've seen it a number of times in California. There are some jurisdictions that are able, because of their statutes, to actually use the intelligent mail barcode scans. There is a scan that corresponds to roughly the same time that the piece would have been canceled, so they can actually just go back and use the scan data for that particular piece if they are indeed using unique intelligent mail barcodes on their return envelopes as well. So that's one option. That's why putting unique intelligent mail barcodes on not only the outbound but also the inbound, so you know which specific voter's ballot is coming back and you have that scan data. So that's one option. There are also considerations that we know the USPS is considering potentially making some adjustments to the intelligent mail barcode to potentially flag ballots specifically, and that's something we're very excited to hear that they're considering. That would be huge, because then they would actually have the visibility within their own system to track where every ballot that has an intelligent mail barcode is on it right now. Right now, there's nothing that really differentiates one piece of mail from another piece of mail. There's nothing that specifically says this is an official ballot. So that would be huge. But the biggest thing you can do is, as you start thinking about what your general election ballot is going to look like, put together that sample piece. Tammy talked about those samples being used and inspected, but you can put that together ahead of time. Even if you don't know the exact races that are going to be on there, you can make some intelligent guesses about it's going to be 3 pages, it's going to be 4 pages, or maybe test different versions of it. Put your pieces together, put your envelope sizes together, take it down to your local post office, have them run it, see if it runs through the automation machine, see if it is flexible enough, work with your mail piece design analyst to actually test all those different things. So there's a lot of things you can do in prep, even if you're not actually dealing with your totally official ballot yet, to make sure that things are going to get processed correctly and that you do get those cancellation dates that you need. Right.
And Monica had mentioned some statutory considerations. What some states have done is they have allowed that in the lack of there being a legible or the presence of a cancellation mark, that you can use the date in which the voter had signed the affidavit that's contained in the packet, because we're talking about a smaller and smaller universe. One other best practice that I've heard is that as the mail pieces are coming in, the return ballot envelopes, that usually they're being time stamped or date stamped in an elections office, and the individual sitting and doing that for hours at a time, they may notice when they start getting ones that are outside of kind of the standard range. And so as you're training that person, say, you know what, if you see anything that's more than 3 or 4 days out, date stamp it, but set that aside, and then look to see if there are any trends, any commonalities. Is that a tray that got put somewhere? Is that a neighborhood that didn't get picked up? So try and do some of that data collection and build it right into your procedures there in the office.
And we'll talk about that a little bit more as well coming up. So let me ask Anthony, what do local election officials need to know about mail traveling out to the voters?
I think, some of the folks here have highlighted this. I think the communication pieces that you put in the mail, the instructions, are the key. I think they need to be clear. I think they need to be concise, and they need to be, I think, very, very specific about the mailing guidelines and the mail timelines. Telling folks what they need to do. I believe Tammy mentioned it too. If postage is needed to be returned, and please specify how much. A lot of this is common sense, if you will, but I think the challenge that we face as elections officials, this is second nature to us, and we assume it's second nature to everybody else. But for many people, 99% of the public, they only have 1 or 2 contacts every couple of years, perhaps, with the elections process. We have a contact with it every day. So we just assume, well, of course everyone knows this. Well, no, of course everyone does not know this. Everyone does not know that you need a 49 or a forever stamp. Everyone does not know that you need 2 to 5 business days. We need to explain that. I would say to our fellow elections officials, put yourself in the position of being in another type of environment, another type of profession that you're unfamiliar with. God forbid if someone was going to put me in a surgical suite, I wouldn't know what to do. They wouldn't say, "Oh, you know what to do. Go right ahead." I would need instructions. You can't pull someone off the street and expect them to know your lingo, to know your timelines. You need to explain that to folks, and that's all that I can say. I can't reiterate that enough. And again, at the risk of beating a dead horse, as they say, but going back to what Monica said, so much of what we face as local election officials sometimes is cleanup, is headaches. Tammy, of course, knows this from her experience, but so much of this can be avoided. And I just say that to our fellow officials.
To communications.
It's all back to communications. It's all back to a plan. No one, I know it's a kind of a hackneyed expression, no one plans to fail. But if you fail to plan, you're setting yourself up for that. And that goes back to your mail piece design. Walk the process back. Think of the pinch points. Think of where you've had problems in the past. and use that as the basis for your planning to avoid that.
So not just going out to the voter, but coming back as well.
Right, and looking
Right.
at your processes internally. Look at where you've, look back to 2014, or maybe in this case, look back to 2012, 2008 if you were there. Where was your real headache? How can we avoid that going forward? And a lot of it is simple, but a lot of it is, because there's so much coming at the local election officials at times, and you're sometimes in the eye of the storm, you don't think that big picture. But take a moment, take a couple steps back, think big picture, plan, and avoid those problems. And communicate with your voters. Can't say that enough.
So tag 191 is the green
There you
tag
go.
for ballots.
There it is.
And so
visual.
we know that not all jurisdictions
That's
are
awesome.
using the green tag. And think about using the green tags if you also mail out alternative format ballots in Braille or large print. They may be going through a separate channel, but they also, in addition to getting the postage paid because it's special services for the blind and or the disabled, you additionally should be putting that tag on to raise the awareness that these are official ballots. And those are free from your local offices. They would go only on your ballots. They're to raise the level of visibility in the mail stream.
And I think you mentioned too we also have to take into account mail coming back from the voter, particularly with our overseas citizens and our
my next
military
question.
voters. They are, and with the increased emphasis on blank ballot delivery, we're having our voters who are actually using their own envelopes. They're printing out paper. We call it origami. They're making their own envelopes.
Right.
So when you take a look at ballot design and a lot of this, those are some of the things that we need to take into consideration as well. Is that voters are putting these into their own envelopes. How thick are they? And then how can our election officials help those voters out? What's the information that they need to have so that the voter knows exactly what to do, not only in creating these paper envelopes, but what are some of the dangers, what are the pitfalls, what are the things that they need to know?
Right, and I should just key off on that as well. Delaware is one example. As states move towards, depending on your legislative capabilities, more of online return, be very clear, like you're saying in those instructions, because if you're putting that in the hands of the voter to print things out, to apply things to envelopes, make it clear. Don't create any pinch points or any kind of areas of confusion, because inevitably that's what will happen.
So David, as we've said, we all agree that sending and returning of ballots to our military members is critical. What procedures are you all working on to meet the mission for the 2016 election? Are there any process and procedures that require more of an expedited delivery or return through the military post offices? Or
Well, what we do, all ballots are all balloting material is the first mail that is worked in all military post offices. That's first and foremost. And if there's limited transportation for the movement of that mail, those things move. We have, for instance, within the Central Command Theater, the commander, he has habitually in the past signed a memo that has stated that mail from a logistics standpoint moves and must move.
so it's priority.
It has priority over everything else.
And I would echo what David is saying. For the Postal Service, ballots mailed to the military service members, being the active military service members and their eligible dependents overseas, they receive special identification container labels through the USPS. They do also receive preferred handling at USPS plants and gateways. And then on the return, the completed ballots may be returned by Priority Mail Express. That is paid through an appropriation, providing expedited service from the military post offices through delivery at the local election offices. So there is an expedited procedure, and as David indicated very clearly, it is, it moves when it hits our gateway or any of our facilities. It's going through the gateway, being turned over to the military, and then it's expedited through the military on the way out and on the return.
Matt, do you have any recommendations to the local election officials on procedures they can use to expedite some of these military ballots?
Yeah, we always are encouraging our local election officials to use the resources that are out there. We have a whole page on the FVAP.gov website for election officials that have to do with mail. We're encouraging them again to use expedited mailing. There's the use of of our postage page, our posted paid indicia that goes out that they can use for our military and overseas voters, as well as particularly the use of the DoD Label 11 in order to expedite some mailing back.
What is a DoD Label 11?
I think David can best explain that, and he's got a visual there as well. David, can you explain that?
The Label 11 is this is a label that is placed on every ballot. It's been mandated through legislation that the appropriations are set forth at USPS. So we at all the military post offices, we place one of these labels on each voted absentee ballot. We give we tear off a part, give it back to the mailer so that they can track it. It has a tracking number, barcode, so it can be tracked all the way through the system to the point of delivery. So
that's highly recommended.
absolutely.
And that's something that we encourage our military members to use. It's a resource for them. And again, for election officials, is to encourage that use when they're educating their voter on everything else in terms of how to return a ballot. Military members, please make sure that you're using the DoD Label 11 to return your ballot.
The only other thing I guess I would add is that in order to have this or receive this from the military post office, the ballot has to be presented to the military post office. It's not something they can just go walk in and pick up. So we actually put that on the envelope before we accept it, do the acceptance scan, and then put it into the network going back to USPS.
Good to know.
And to emphasize what David was just saying, the Party Mail Express label being the 11 DoD, that's monitored and tracked from point of origin military post offices to delivery at local election offices through improved tracking. Both USPS and MPS have made recent system enhancements, and those have greatly improved capabilities to provide tracking and handoff visibility along the entire acceptance, transportation, processing, and delivery cycle.
And we're actually doing a pilot project with MPSA, USPS, and some jurisdictions during the 2016 election cycle to do some of these ballot tracking type activities. So that we'll be really excited to share that with the election community.
Right.
And one other just comment on that, something for the local election officials to keep in mind. You know, we've been talking about communication and resources. You know, with FVAP. You know, reach out to FVAP. They have a tremendous amount of resources. We're doing training in Delaware. You know, have folks coming in to our state. You know, these folks want to come out. The USPS, FVAP. You know, they want to come out. The EAC. And talk to local officials. Be there. Don't be afraid to ask. I mean, that's why everybody's here. And you know, and even though, for example, in our jurisdiction in Delaware, we're fortunate to have a lot of experienced people. You know, you have to keep that in mind. You know, inevitably, I think, Dan, you said about promoting from within at USPS. There's always going to be turnover. There's always going to be changes. You know, make sure all of your staff are familiar and keep priming the pump for the next generation of people to become familiar with these things. You can't learn this stuff overnight, but the resources are here to help. So.
Yeah, and if I can add back onto that as well, again, there are these federal resources and our experts. I mean, we've got access to Tammy and Monica, who have really taken on this mail challenge, but you find out that it really is this wanting to, or this need to know of information. People just don't know. And so when you've got a group of people who are saying, hey, listen, we have the answers, we've got resources for you to use, local election officials love to get that information and pass it on. Once you tell them, you can just see it in their eyes. They're ready to solve problems. They're ready to jump in. We talked about recently about the lack of awareness of the new standard address for APO addresses for our military members overseas. Election officials just weren't aware of changes on that, and those changes have been in effect, I think, since July of 2015. But people just weren't aware of those changes. So once now that we're bringing that to their attention, they're like, whoa, we didn't know this. How do we communicate these to our voters? So showing them examples of what these addresses should look like. They now they have the ability now to go out and educate their voters as well.
And to follow up on that, just on the address format, how long are we going to be forwarding to the old addresses, and when does that stop?
I can take that. We've recently talked about that internally. We are going to run dual sort plans, so it'll be seamless to the voters today if they're addressing to a military installation or ship overseas, we will deliver it. There's not going to be any delay in service for that.
So we're safe for 2016.
For 2016, we're good. I'll make that commitment.
We have talked about this a little bit, but there's gonna come a date when you have passed the window where that ballot is going to get back.
Sure.
So in addition to putting maybe it's a last day to mail, or maybe it's just the last date that you can accept mail, whatever you want in your voter instructions, make sure you're also putting in there the other options to get your ballots back. If you have drop boxes, make sure you're telling people where they can find those locations. If you have just dropping them at the election office or hours for other locations, make sure those are in your voter instructions too, so that you're not just saying, oh, it's past the date that you can mail it back, but you're also giving them options to really get it back even past that date.
Under the new standard, what is the last date that election offices can send a ballot out, and what is the last date to have a ballot coming back in? Not necessarily a date, a day. How far in advance of an election day?
It all depends. Again, I would strongly encourage, working
Worst
with...
case scenario.
Worst case scenario, domestic, first class mail, 5 days out, 5 days back. That's worst case. It would be, that would be the outer bounds on both using first class mail. Again, there's significant improvements. If you're doing local to local, we can do that, 2 days out, 2 days back.
But be aware that there are also places within your delivery area, especially if you're mailing automation mail or bulk mail that has to go out to a processing center, that may be nowhere near. Even if the mail is actually only going a few blocks at the end of the day, it may still be traveling to a processing center that's way the heck away. So make sure you understand where your mail travels to and where it has to go based on what type of mail it is and how you're mailing it. Class matters, size matters, all these things matter, which is why it's really important to actually test your pieces before you send them out so that you know what's going on.
And that's a great point. I can't emphasize that enough. I'm going to just jump on here. So, testing mail pieces, it doesn't have to stop with just sending pieces to Mail Piece Design. You can actually create mock-up pieces and test your intelligent mail barcodes and everything. Just put it in the mail, pay the postage, mail it, and it's a great way to vet any issues early. So if you actually do mock mailings, might be 10 pieces, might be 100 pieces, send them to different destinations, it's a great idea.
Great. Well, speaking of things, that people don't know, that we need to get educated on, as Matt was talking about, what is load leveling? And why is it done? And what impact does it have on election mail?
Load leveling would only affect standard mail. It is a standard mail smoothing of volume that comes in on Fridays. Now, load leveling, of course, Monday is the busiest mail day for us, as far as a delivery perspective. We have carriers that are out well into the night delivering mail, and to smooth that process, a lot of the commercial mail that comes in, we're actually, if it comes in on a Friday, we will make best effort at delivering it for Monday. However, if there is significant mail volume, we reserve the right to defer some of that standard mail to deliver it on Tuesday or Wednesday. So it is important that election officials know that it is not going to affect any of the return ballots. That all comes back first class mail. It is only on the outbound. It only affects standard mail. Again, use green tag 191 for visibility.
Okay. And Monica, I'm going to aim this toward you, and maybe Anthony and Tammy can jump in. The USPS and national and state organizations are offering ballot delivery toolkits and highlighting best practices. And I think you all at your Democracy Works, is that right? Works. That you've done some of that as well. What are the resources that are being made available to ensure vote-by-mail ballots get counted?
So I'm going to plug something that Tammy and I are working on. We have been very generously funded by the Democracy Fund to run electionmail.org. That's our new project with Democracy Works and the Bipartisan Policy Center. And at heart, it is actually a reporting database, so that when a local election official has a problem with their mail or has an issue, even if you don't know whether it's a problem, even if it just looks weird and you want to report it, there's a form on electionmail.org, and you can go and you can fill it out. And that's going to go straight to Tammy and I, but it will also go to the USPS. And so immediately there's going to be visibility of issues all over the country. And that's one of the things we've created for this year, simply because we want to know what's going on. There hasn't really been a comprehensive reporting solution for election mail issues for local election officials. They've sort of worked with their local post office, which is wonderful, and you should continue to do that. Don't stop doing that. But this is another way to give visibility to the issues all across the country. And hopefully, if we can get enough folks using this tool early enough, so as you're doing your presidential preference primaries, as you're doing other local elections in the spring this year, if you start seeing issues and we can get a scope of issues early on, then that's a great way for us to maybe be able to address some of these things before we start hitting presidential primaries in general. So that's one option. The EAC website has a USPS issues page that's being created right now. That's a wonderful place to go.
BeReady16.
BeReady16
EAC.gov.
And there's also a hashtag if you are a Twitter user, BeReady16. So following those things, following Tammy on Twitter is a great way to figure out election mail. Everyone knows she's very active on there, and honestly, anything you can do to get the awareness out. The other thing is we're talking to local jurisdictions all the time about intelligent mail barcodes, how to use them. A lot of jurisdictions don't know that if you're using bulk mail, if you are mailing anything, any of your ballots bulk mail, they already have intelligent mail barcodes on them because it's required to get that discount.
Right.
So your mail vendor may very well already be doing this, and you may just not be getting the data back. One of the things Dan said earlier that I want to highlight is that mailer ID. A lot of mail vendors actually use their own mailer ID, but that mailer ID identifies who owns the data about that mail. So election jurisdictions, you may want to actually apply for your own mailer ID and ask your mail vendor to use that one on your mail, because that ensures that not only do you have access to the data straight through the USPS portal, which is awesome, but you also, it's your data, and you don't, if anything ever happens with that mail vendor, you don't have to go and ask them for your data and ask them to see it. You can get it and you can see it right away. So those are just a couple of things that are out there.
What types of things? What kind of information should they be tracking?
Sure. So a variety of things, depending on what we're talking about. A lot of the focus lately, because of some postmarking challenges, have been on ballot delivery and ballot return. So any time that they can give us, whether it's to their local postmaster, also to this new tool that we're creating, to the elections task force, to Dan's email directly and personally, are things like the intelligent mail barcode data. When that's available. If they don't have that, the scans of or pictures of the actual envelopes, and then what is best coupled with that is to know what class of service did this go out or come back at, when were things mailed, what were the applicable addresses, so that we can take a look and try and work back through the issues and see where it was identified as being problematic. If they have the postmarking data, that's important to know. We've saw a lot of ballots, and many jurisdictions have been saying, we're getting all these ballots back now on Wednesdays. And originally we thought, well, it was around the same time as load leveling was being brought forth, but it was also the same time that the standards went into play. And so those two kind of challenges got a little convoluted, when in fact what it is that we see that voters are dropping off their ballots on Monday and Tuesday, and if it's a ballot in hand by 7 or 8 o'clock on Tuesday night, it's never going to get to that elections office in time. And it could very well be that when the standards were 1 or 2, 3 days at the very longest, and they put in the mail on Friday, they were fine, but now it's not fine anymore. So just knowing what those challenges are and having a place to go and see, is this something that's happening elsewhere in the country, and what did they do to resolve it, is really what we're hopeful that this will be able to be used as a resource for everyone.
So if you could indulge me, for each of us, probably not you as much, but could you give us the contact information again for your email address or your email address, FVAPs? How should local election directors get in contact to send this information to our various organizations, so we can funnel it to the USPS and try to work on solutions to these issues?
Oh, thank you. You want to send it to the election mail program manager at USPS.gov.
Okay. Tammy?
The new tool, when it's up and operational, which should be not long after this airs, if not already up and running when this is first webcast, is going to be electionmail.org. And everything that goes in there is going to generate an email to myself, to Monica, and to Dan.
And for the EAC, oops, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say the great thing about that is, we just listed off a whole bunch of things that you should have about your mailing all this data. That form on electionmail.org will walk you through all of it. And what I would say is don't ever let it stop you from submitting something. If you say, well, I don't really have this, submit it anyway. You'll get a call or an email from one of us. We'll help you. We really, really, really want you to be able to collect actionable data so that we can get some of these things solved and they don't just keep being anecdotes that we hear about after the fact as horror stories. That's what we're looking to avoid. So timeliness is absolutely critical, but don't ever be afraid of not having enough information. We can help you find the information that you need.
And I'd also say, in regards to the election center, if you're a member of the Election Center, we're also dedicating something on the Election Center website for a postal issues drop down. So again, notify us there, notify the Postal Task Force. Tammy's very active in that as well. Again, we're just a lot of us. It's better to over communicate. I would say get it to more people. We'll get it in multiple hands. It will get handled, and this new tool is going to be phenomenal for election officials. Very excited.
And you can send it to the EAC at BeReady16 at EAC.gov.
And for FVAP, it's vote@fvap.gov.
Do you have a?
Don't have an org, but I know that if it goes to USPS, we will see it.
Right.
And I'm
If it
sure you'll
involves
be
the
in touch
military.
with FVAP
And
as
it's the
well.
same thing.
Yeah.
We get a lot of questions from election officials about military mail. Our relationship with both MPSA and the USPS helps facilitate those conversations, as well as we encourage election officials for any of their questions. Just send us an email, give us a call. We have great partnerships with the EAC, with our policy advisors. Everybody is here to help, and we've got outreach to all of those avenues to help local election officials.
Definitely.
So I'm going to just go around the table now. If you were going to tell voters, both UOCAVA and civilian general population voters, one thing that they need to know if they're voting by mail, what would that thing be? And I'll start with you, Dan.
Do it early.
Do it early. Tammy.
Yeah, I would just echo that. Make sure that you understand how long it could potentially get back, and also what your resources are to track the ballot on its return, to know that if it, know when it got back in time, and if there were any issues with it that you might need to resolve.
This may sound silly, but your vote counts. We get that question time and time again. Your vote counts if you're voting absentee. It counts just as if you went to the polling place.
People do wonder if they vote.
People do. We get that question,
Yeah.
and we'll inevitably get it many, many times this election season too.
Okay, Matt.
It's your vote definitely counts, and ensure that it does count.
Yes.
Act early.
And
Monica.
piggybacking on that, many jurisdictions actually have online tools that let you look up your ballot, your specific ballot, and see how it was counted. And if there was a problem, take advantage of those.
Yes.
If your election office doesn't have one, drop your clerk a note and ask why. Those kind of things are available to make sure that we are as transparent as possible about this process, because we do want everybody to know that their vote counts.
Absolutely, and then to add on to that, one of the recommendations that we came up with in our cooperative agreement with the Council of State Governments was this whole idea about voter communication and encouraging state and local election officials to actively communicate with our voters, to tell them, hey, listen, we received your ballot. We certainly know for our military and overseas voters, those often come from remote places around the world. And our military members need to have confidence that if they put their ballot into the mail in a remote location, that it's received and counted at their local election official. And a really great way to let that know and to ensure that that process is working is simple communications from our local election officials.
David, one thing from the military post office point of view that voters need to know.
Mail it by the recommended mailing date that's listed in each post office around the world.
Okay. Well, I'd like to give each one of you, before we close, an opportunity to provide your one or two takeaways that you think are most important that we talked about today to communicate to the local election officials and the state officials out there who are working on these election mail issues and just getting the ballots out to our voters. So let me start with you, Daniel. We'll go back around this way.
Thank you. The points that I'd like to emphasize is please work now with your election mail coordinators. It is essential to open up that line of communication. Anthony also brought up a good point about working with your business mail acceptance unit clerks as well as the postmasters. Develop and foster those relationships. They will be invaluable going through this election cycle because you will call on them time and time again. We're here to support you. We're rich with resources. Please leverage us in your design, in your prep and entry, as well as your coordination of pickup activities. I think Tammy had indicated a couple, one with a post office box that you can pick up from. We also have a caller service available. And as we're doing sweeps, it's very important to have a coordinated activity, know your resources, and call on them.
I would just say that one of the things that strikes me in working with the post office is that it's very similar to election administration. We want to push everything towards automated processes, but we still have some of these tangential manual processes that can slow us down. So I think election administrators need to understand what they're doing that could potentially be more time consuming than the automated path. And don't wait until the Wednesday after Election Day, Tuesday, to find out that there are issues. So verify your materials comply with the current postal standards and design elements. Remember that these dates have changed. Review your dates and deadlines that you have that you're articulating to your voters, and revisit those messages if in fact they need to reflect the new reality.
So don't assume things have remained the same.
They absolutely have not remained the same.
Not.
The
We have a new
standards
reality.
the standards have changed. The design elements, the use of the official election material logo has changed in size, because in some cases it was so large because you want it prominent, but it was so large it was getting into other parts of the envelope that was slowing down the processing of the ballots coming back. So things have definitely changed. So before you spend all that money on new envelopes or new materials, make sure that they comply, and that's very easy to do. There's also a telephone number for the Mail Design Analyst, and that's 855-593-6093.
And I'd like to add one additional thing. As Tammy was talking, it kind of stuck in my mind. It was like, let's just, to be ready for 2016. Again, Mailpiece Design Analysts, I cannot emphasize them enough. We also have the official election mail kit. It'll be available in PDF format. We will obviously avail it to all of you here. You can publish it on your websites or a link to it from USPS.com. That should be available next week. We are targeting the end of February to mail that kit out as well. A lot of the things that we talked about today, best practices, various publications and specifications for USPS compliance and optimization of mailpiece design, it's in there, and it will be on its way out to the election officials.
Great. All this is critically important in this presidential election year. So.
Exactly right.
Anthony.
And thank you. And actually, some of the folks led right into this. Two things I would say real quickly. Don't assume you know the answer, because a lot has changed. And more importantly, don't be afraid to ask the question.
Yeah.
I think a lot of election officials are afraid that if they ask a question, they're going to look uninformed, they're going to look unprepared. It's better to ask. It's better to plan ahead than to be cleaning up a mess later because you didn't ask the question. Don't be afraid.
Right.
Everyone's here to help. This is a no-blame environment, but just ask. The resources are there. Reach out and get them.
And it's better to ask early and get the right answer than have a crisis on your hands.
Exactly.
And the media after you to answer those
that's
questions.
what you don't want.
So.
One of the last slides in my presentations to local election officials has a graphic, and it's of Rosie the Riveter, and it says, roll up your sleeves. And that's exactly what I encourage election officials to do. Roll up their sleeves, get involved. Just by us being here today talking about it raises the issue of mail awareness. And so this is something that we're encouraging election officials, get involved with this, understand. We talk about best practices, communicate, collaboration. These are the things that election officials do really well. So let's apply that to election mail so that our voters get the best. We certainly know that our military members they're younger, primarily male. They need to understand this process, and so we're begging them to act early. And we need our election officials in their communications with those particular voters is to make that communication very easy to understand, very concise, so that that voter can understand the process and then contribute to the process of democracy. And again, thanks to everybody here today for this conversation, and thanks for including DoD in it.
Absolutely. Critically important. Monica.
I can't plug the intelligent mail barcode tracking enough. This is the best way to have total visibility about what's happening, not just on your outbound pieces, but if you can get those unique barcodes on your return pieces as well, it is so powerful. I mean, the things that you can tell from the data, you can literally look at a map and see where it's taking, maybe 8 or 9 days to process to a certain zip code, but it's only taking 3 to process to another zip code. And you can know that as an election official and take that into account in your processes. If, a whole flat of mail suddenly goes missing, you're going to see that in the scan data because it's missing right away, maybe even in time to fix it for an election. And, there's nothing like having a problem that you can't fix and you don't know what went wrong and now it's in the newspaper. And that happened a lot in 2015. I have a whole list of stories from across the country. Be aware that whether you've had a problem in the past is not necessarily a good predictor of whether you're going to have a problem in the future. And so making sure that you have the tracking data just in case you need it, it's not that hard to implement. So that's one of the things you can do just as insurance. Just have it, and if you need it, it's there. If you don't, even better. But have the data and have the ability to take action if you need to.
Thank you. David, a couple last thoughts.
2 things. Where possible, design ballots to be letter mail. And then the second would be to verify to ensure that whatever design you have, that it doesn't cause problems for USPS automation.
Okay. Well, I think this panel has provided election officials with a lot of information to help them plan their election mail and sending and receiving ballots back and forth through the USPS and the Military Postal Service. And I want to thank each of our participants for your time and your expertise and your willingness to be available to our election officials across the country who are dealing with these issues and who are on the front lines of voting in the United States. So thank you very much for that. And I want to just point out that this is especially critical this year, preparing for the 2016 primaries and elections, which are about to start. We only have a few more days, and from when we're taping this webcast to the first caucuses in Iowa, and we'll see. It's going to be an interesting election season, and hopefully there won't be a lot of election mail problems. So thank you all. I want to also just emphasize that the EAC is here to help as well. You can, with any kind of election issue, you can get in touch with us. So thank you, every single one of you people, for all of your help and expertise, and we hope that this is helpful for election officials across the country. Thank you.
Thank you.